Good afternoon. My task today is to discuss to you about evaluative assessment. At the end of the lesson, it is expected that we will be having a clearer definition of assessment in educational context. It's also expected that after the discussion, we can be able to distinguish evaluative assessment from the rest of other conventional assessments. And also, after this, we are more likely to give other examples of evaluative assessments that teachers can employ in the conduct of her profession. Let us now begin. Okay, what we can see on screen are the usual things that a learner does inside a classroom. Participating in an art activity, taking part in educational games, reading a self-made poem in front of the class, preparing for a group report, and answering test questionnaires. But what is this all about? What is the objective of indulging our learners to these activities? Well, the answer only boils down to one certain purpose, and that is to measure a learner's knowledge, abilities, and skills. In general, we call these activities as assessments. Meaning to say, assessment is not confined to a teacher-made test or a pen and paper test. Assessment may vary in nature and in structure. In view of this, how do we define now assessment? Okay, assessment in the context of education is a process of documenting empirical data on the knowledge and skills of a learner. In other words, it is anything that a teacher does to measure the learning gains of her class. The next question is, why is assessment important? Why do we need to provide differentiated assessment to our learners? Okay, aside from the purpose of grading the learners and providing them constructive feedbacks about how are they doing in class, assessments also help teachers to reflect on important questions, which is something to contribute in the conduct of her teaching. First, is she teaching what she thinks she's teaching? Are her students learning from what they are supposed to be learning? Is there a way for her to teach the subject better than she teaches it before? Okay, if most of the learners displays poor productivity to your assessments, the answer to the first two questions is basically a no. Meaning, you fail to teach what you're supposed to teach, therefore your learners fail to learn what they're supposed to learn. And since that is the case, then it is just right to improve on your teaching strategies. And that is the beauty of assessment. It helps you reflect on your teaching. Okay, what I have on screen are the major types of assessments in the form of test questionnaires. The diagnostic test, the formative test, and the summative test. The diagnostic test is commonly given at the beginning of a school year, whereas the formative test is given from time to time, especially every time that a teacher finishes on discussing a certain topic, whereas the summative test is commonly given quarterly or every after a semester. So these assessments are generally classified as pen and paper assessments, to which scores are derived by simply counting the number of correct answers in the test. Let's say Ezekiel got 25 correct answers out of 50, while Michelle got 40. But categorically, as provided in my first slide, if you can still remember, there are other assessments which does not give precise points to a learner. Let's say a poem recital, a group presentation, or an art activity. So these type of assessments are generally classified as evaluative assessment. So when we say evaluative assessment, it is a critical assessment of one's performance and quality of work in relation to a predefined standards. This is anything done through subjective judgments following a specific set of criteria. Evaluative assessment is characterized from being performance-based and output-based. It is the judgment that provides the score, making it subjective in nature. Okay, one good example of this is the way singers are judged in a singing contest. There could be 2 or 3 or more judges, and these judges are independent to each other. What is good to one may not be good for the other judges. This is how an evaluative assessment works. I also want to give emphasis on predefined standards. This is another thing that is distinct to evaluative assessment. It requires set of criteria in order to lessen, if not totally eliminate, subjectivity. In layman's term, this is criteria for judging. But for the purpose of assessment, we call this one as rubrics. So what is a rubric? A rubric is a scoring guide used to evaluate the quality of a learner or group of learners' work. So I made my own examples of rubrics here. One is for group reporting and another one for an art activity. So for group report, a group can have the perfect score if all members participated and the topic is delivered well and they were able to provide activities. 15 points will be given if there are fewer members who participated in the group. 10 points if the delivery is not that good and there were no activities provided. And 5 points if the group is evidently unprepared. For an artwork, 9 or 10 can be given for the best work. 7 or 8 will be given if the work is less artistic. 4 to 6 points if instructions were not followed, and up to maximum of 3 points only if the work is submitted late. So this is how we grade our students in an evaluative assessment. Okay, another beauty of or another advantage of an evaluative assessment is that it can be used to teach learners the value of correct judgment. Teachers can actually ask her learners to evaluate himself or his own work or evaluate his classmates' work. So these modes of evaluative assessment are known as self-assessment and peer assessment. Okay, it is now clear to us that an evaluative assessment is not based on scores derived from a test. It is a judgment of a student's work based on the given criteria. Okay, before we end, let us do a self-check of our key takeaways for this topic. First, what do you call to anything that a teacher does to measure the learning gains of her class? Okay, the correct answer is assessment. Next question. This is a critical assessment of one's performance and quality of work in relation to a predefined standards or criteria. Okay, evaluative assessment. Next, this is used in an evaluative assessment to score the quality of a learner or a group of learners' work. The answer is rubric. Number 4, this type of test or this type of assessment is given to learners from time to time to measure what has retained to them after a certain topic. Okay, formative test. Okay, next, a test which is commonly given quarterly or every after a semester. Okay, summative test. Okay, so that concludes our discussion. Thank you and God bless.